The next question is on a progressive dues structure. We will now consider the National Executive Committee's proposal to change the manner in which membership dues are collected. So I will ask, is it still Maggie and Wayne, or is it Ben and Wayne? Or all three. I'm easy. So I will ask all three to present the resolution that will be brought to a vote of the members and to explain the rationale. After a 10-minute presentation, there will be a 20-minute question period. Just as we did earlier, we'll be displaying... Have we been putting up the questions, by the way? I haven't even looked on the screen behind me. Have the questions for the ballot been put up on the screen behind me? Well, I don't actually have eyes back here. So here they are. Come on up. Oh, there he is. Okay, great. If you guys want to sit here, I'll stand. So 10. Try to creep. So let's just try to keep it brief, 10 minutes. And this is mostly for questions, so go ahead. And introduce yourselves before you speak.
Hello, everyone. I'm Wayne Fan, and I'm a member of the Finance Committee and co-chair of the Young Members Advisory Committee. And as well, I'm part of the team that submitted this motion to the NEC late last year.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Simpson. I'm one of the co-chairs with Wayne of the Young Members Committee, and I'm Local 507 at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada.
Hi, I'm Ben Renee. I'm the communications officer, one of the communications officers at CAPE. I'm here because I've actually written a lot of the material for this, so I'm de facto the subject expert on this. So, otherwise, I know nothing about finance, so don't listen to me on that.
Yeah, so I can make a start of it. So it's pretty straightforward. So we consulted with members 3 different proposals. One is a 3-step progressive rate option, and the next one is a sort of steady increase in progressive rates. And the last one is a flat rate across the board at 0.75%, essentially per month of the salaries. And the last option is a status quo of flat fees as it currently stands. And so basically there was some consultation, and and essentially there was an overwhelming consensus that the 0.75% would be the most appropriate option to be pushed forward for this vote. And there is a lot of people who also voted for the other 2 progressive options as well. So it was a pretty close tie, and of course there's around a quarter of the folks who voted for the status quo. So I think as it stands, it seems that we'll go forward with the option number 3. And anything to add?
There's a bit of a PowerPoint.
Okay.
So just to reiterate what Wayne said, the straw poll, we had a special general meeting in February, and that was kind of the first attempt, the first step in this process, where we consulted with members and we got to have a feel about how they felt about the different options. So we had a straw poll then. There was a series of consultation that took place in locals across the country. So here in the NCR, as well as from Vancouver all the way to St. John's. Members there also had a chance to discuss a proposed change to the dues structure. And there were some straw polls taken there. And obviously we received feedback by email as well. So the cumulative effect of all that feedback was sent back to the NEC, and then the NEC chose option 3 based, steered by that feedback. So that's where we are now. One of the questions that comes up a lot is why adopt a progressive due structure? And really what it comes down to is that right now entry-level positions are paying a lot more as a percentage of their salary than their higher ups. So it can go anywhere from, I believe it's 1.119% all the way to 0.54%, if I recall correctly. So what this progressive due structure would be to make it so that everybody pays 0.75% across the board. So in terms of what that looks like, and just to say that all this information is in this little brochure that was in your kit, and if you're watching online, this is all on the web as well, because I know this is going to be a little bit unreadable from the back of the room there, but that's why we came with print material. So it's not necessarily it's a revenue neutral change in our due structure. So CAPE isn't going to suddenly have a lot more revenue to deal with. Really, all this is, it's a revenue neutral at the point that it's established. So some members will see their dues decrease, others will see their dues increase, but everybody would be paying the same, so 0.75. And it's important to mention that that 0.75% figure is applicable to the first step of your classification and level. So if you've already moved on to step number 4, you're really only paying dues based on your step number 1. And finally, I guess it's important to note that these things already exist in other public sector labor union. I think us and PIPS are pretty much one of the few outliers where it's a flat fee. But most other unions have a percentage-based dues structure. So we've collected a few here to showcase. And more importantly, the 0.75% is much lower than our counterparts. And then that takes us to the question. So I guess, do you have anything else to add?
Perfect. That's about 10 minutes. All right. So, questions? I mean, I would repeat the same questions, same process I had before, but basically it's the same process, name, department, and we'll go officially for 20 minutes, but it's the last item, so if you guys want to go longer, go nuts. Miranda.
So a fast question. I just wondered what happens after we have a new contract. So I know like the February document said something like it's current as of today's contract. Once we land on a new contract, it'll be reevaluated or something like that. So is it retroactively we'll have to pay like 3 years of dues increases? And just like, will you be considering the impact to, you know, I really like your graphic that says your dues are going to increase or decrease, but that'll drastically change, right?
Yeah.
So right now, if it's approximately 7,000 of our ECs that would see a dues increase. If we land on the contract negotiations, you know, in early 2017, then I suspect that number will greatly increase.
I don't think there will be any retroactive changes, right? So after the contract comes into play, new contract comes into play, we would not see any, additional money that would have to be paid into, to compensate for, I guess the money we missed out on. But it would, I think that's a very important thing we should make very clear, right? Is that as we negotiate to essentially increase our salaries, and if this new dues proposal that's being put forward is tied, right, to the salary amount, right, then you would see an increase of those dues along with those, along with our salary increases, right? I think that's, pretty understandable. I think most people understand inflationary pressures, and just, the cost of rent going up, et cetera, et cetera. So it adds a certain amount of stability to the association. And I struggle with this for a long time as well, personally, when I'm looking at this. And if you think about it from the other way around, if you have that fixed amount, you don't necessarily say that's a, essentially a dues decrease structure, right? Because it doesn't take into account of inflationary pressures. So there's both sides to the story, and of course that's taken very seriously.
Microphone 1.
Hi, Laura Ferguson again, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. One thing that just strikes me as a bit odd is the amount, 0.75%. It does seem significantly lower than all the other unions. And I'm wondering if there's sort of a longer-term plan once this has been implemented to increase it further to make it more in line with the other unions, or whether to, like you were talking about inflation, to take that into account.
Hit the button. There you go.
Sorry. So maybe I'll answer this, and maybe the other folks can jump in as well. I don't think there is any. This, I think, is separate from the idea of having to increase dues. The big point of this is that we're trying to, make sure that things are equitable for people across different salary levels. And I think if we do want to have another, dues increase, vote, that should be a separate discussion. But I think that's actually something worth looking into. I personally don't know very much about that and haven't really explored that in depth. But maybe the other two panelists could contribute as well.
Like Wayne said, this is only a question about the dues structure. And to pick up on the earlier point, obviously this would make our operations more sustainable, right? So we would, in theory, go to the membership less frequently to ask for dues increase. But more importantly, the membership is in charge of the budget. So the membership votes annually on the budget. The membership is in charge of whether or not to accept a dues increase. And we have annual meetings for that purpose. So this does not change that system. You're still going to have the opportunity to chime in every year, just like you are now. So the membership is still very much in charge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Microphone number 2.
Hi, Joyce Giles from ESTC. So I'm just going to ask the question that all my EC colleagues asked me when I told them about this, none of whom were participated in any of the straw polls that were taken. When I suggested that they would pay more for the same service, they said, why? So why should an EC6, 7, or 8 pay more for the same service than an EC1 or 2 is getting? Because at the end of the day, that's what the dues are paying. We're paying for a service. No different than when you go to Tim Hortons and buy a coffee. That's the price of doing business. So why? Besides the equity argument, which no one's really fully explained, just to say it's equitable.
Okay. So this kind of idea of equity is something that our tax system is based on. So there's a difference between equity and equality. So the Young Members Committee thought it was important to support young members and people that were maybe earlier on in their careers and at that lower salary level and are maybe entering the public service with particular challenges. We thought it was a way that the union could support them. People are entering with higher debt loads than ever before, or they're maybe thinking about starting a family, and this is just one way that we could show our support for young members. And we thought that was an idea of fairness that we wanted to support as a union and as our committee, recognizing those challenges that young members face. There's also another way to look at it in terms of the way that we negotiate our contracts, that CAPE negotiates our contracts. So it's on a percentage basis, kind of similar to the proposal that this is, that if CAPE negotiates a 1.5% increase to our salaries, that will benefit someone who is making $100,000 differently than someone who's making $50,000. So it's kind of the same principle, but just applied to our due structure. So it would almost be making things a little more consistent in our union and how we kind of look at fairness. Does that answer your question? I don't know if Wayne,
Apparently not.
Well, I didn't know if I got to respond.
No, it's okay.
Sure.
The reason an EC6 makes more is because they do more work. It's climbing up the levels. This is what it's all about. But kind of what you're telling me is that, that the lower group needs charity. And so you're deciding that my charity should go towards the lower group. That's how I'm interpreting it.
I'm sorry.
And I could
don't mean to
argue that
interrupt
I could, you want me to be altruistic, is what you're saying. And so I would like to rather choose where my charity money goes, rather than people who in an EC level are going to climb up to the top, probably eventually, and also start at a much better salary than, say, a minimum wage earner or someone like that. Those are other people we might consider.
For sure. I don't know if you want to hop in or.
That's very much a sort of a issue of values, right? And I remember sort of when we were talking about this, and I got a surprisingly large number of people who are at the higher salary levels said, this is a great idea. And I wouldn't mind, because I make more, I feel like I have more responsibility toward the membership, that I'm willing to pay a little bit more. And, when you look at the amount, it's not that much difference. A lot of it is symbolic of how we, value people across the different spectrums of salary levels. And I respectfully disagree with that, those arguments, but I do understand there are different value systems, and I think we can put it at that. Thanks. Sorry, one more.
One more, sorry. I want to thank you for your opinion, because it's very valid, and it's good to hear from our members what they're thinking about the progressive due structure. And I get what you're saying, and you're thinking of it as charity, and I see it as more of empathy. I remember what it was like being a student and, not having a lot of money, having a huge debt load. Students are facing higher debt loads than ever before, and they're entering into the public service, and it's quite challenging. And I remember what it was like being in that position, and, I very soon will be, in the portion that will be increasing in dues. But I would like to see that for the young public servants that I see coming in and wanting to do that for them. But thank you so much for...
Microphone one.
Hi, I'm Beth Greene from Library and Archives Canada. I just more have a comment and not really a question, and I'm just looking at the rates of how, if we do accept the proposal where EC1s are their monthly amount decreases based on salary based, and then compared to an EC8. I'm just looking at the amount for an EC8, and it's $18.89 a month in an increase. And when you're making over $100,000 a year, I don't think it's that much money. That it's maybe a couple of cups of coffee at Starbucks for a week. And for me, a union is about solidarity and collectivity, and it's about supporting everyone in the group as well. So I just want to say, I'm really happy to see the youth or young members of CAPE put this forward, and just I applaud you on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Before I go to microphone 2, are there any questions from the internet? Oh. How'd you do that? Go ahead.
Sorry, I write like a doctor. I just don't have the medical degree. So this question came in from Janet William. So in March, CAPE marketed the progressive dues debate as the first in a series of in a series. So what other engagement activities have taken place in the NCR leading up to a vote? The lack of engagement around this issue by members signals to me that CAPE has not done a sufficient job in consulting our members on this issue, and that this is not a priority for the majority of members. So I guess I can answer my own question. Okay, yeah.
If you want to pass it off, go ahead, but if you guys can answer, go ahead.
Talk about the process a little more. So this was discussed at length at the Young Members Committee, so we discussed it with our members, and then once we were kind of happy with the proposal and the motion that we wanted to put forward to the NEC, we brought it to an AGM, I believe, and had a discussion with CAPE members, just trying to get the democratic mandate from folks to put this motion forward, to put it on a ballot. And luckily, we had a vote, got the Democratic mandate just to explore what the progressive due structure would look like. And then throughout that process of we developed options with the Finance Committee. And I think there was communication via email and on the CAPE website during that time, and then came back to CAPE members with an overview of the options that were developed with the Finance Committee, as well as some members of the Young Members Committee. And we came back to discuss those options, and I think there was kind of a roadshow across Canada to discuss the options and which ones folks preferred. And we kind of have the results of the straw poll. I think it was, well, I have a total number of those supporting a progressive due structure in general, which was 79% of those who were straw polled, compared to 21% that would prefer the status quo. And I think there was kind of consistent communications throughout that time about, so there definitely was, I hope, I think there was a consistent communication, trying to get feedback from folks on which option that they preferred throughout the development of this. Does that, anything?
Okay. Micro 2.
So the first bit is just a little bit more of my musings. That CAPE has had and has publicized that we've had the lowest dues in all of the public service for a long time now, and I believe we still have the lowest dues, whereas our members aren't at the bottom end of the salary scale by the least. I mean, ECs start a lot higher than a lot of other groups. So it's hard for a lot of members, I think, to find that the EC 1s and 2s are under undue hardship when we have the lowest dues in all of the government. So to do it as sort of an undue hardship on the lower levels, I think does a disservice to the argument. Also, at a 0.75% pay percent dues structure, the difference between an EC1 and an EC8 isn't peanuts. It's $440 or thereabouts. So I did a quick math. So an EC8 who's making, let's say, $100,000 a year gets a 1.5% pay raise. After taxes, they get to take home an extra $750 a year. Minus the additional $226 in dues, that really whittles away someone's dues increase, someone's negotiated increase. Whereas an EC1 is at a significantly lower tax bracket and pays less dues on the less taxes on that same 1.5% increase, and now gets a benefit of $213 less in dues. So in fact, at the end of a year with a 1.5% increase, an EC1 potentially could be taking home more additional dollars than an EC8, despite the added responsibility of being an assistant director within the government, or the level of responsibility that an EC8 has. That seems to be an undue burden on the higher levels to me. But I don't know if you looked at the tax implications and if it's anything less than a 1.5% raise, for sure an EC1 will be taking home more additional dollars than an EC8.
So I'll maybe take a stab at the first part, which is awesome. Great teamwork here. Just about the undue hardship kind of that the EC1s and EC2s are facing. And I think an important thing that we want to kind of bring back into this analysis is that some folks, in the regions who are EC1s and EC2s, they definitely have like less promotional opportunities, career development opportunities. There's a lot of differences between being in the regions and being in the National Capital Region. More opportunities here for sure, and opportunities to maybe increase and move up in EC level. So I think we need to also consider that and think about the regions in our analysis. And I think it comes back to that idea of fairness and equity, and I think maybe that's just a definitional difference and different, maybe philosophical, that we could talk about for a long period of time. And dues are tax deductible, I just found out.
All right. Wayne, yeah, go ahead. You want to do the other part?
I was going to say that dues are tax deductible, I think that also goes back to that philosophical question, right? Like if you earn more, should you pay a little bit more? And the kind of idea that if you at that level, the kind of job security the government provides, that is something that we cannot take for granted. And I'm moving up the ranks as well, right? So this will not necessarily apply to me later on, and so that's really, I think, at the end of the day, it's a question of values, and I think that's why we always encourage people to go for. Because initially we sort of pushed it for this, generational inequality thing. We got a lot of people just coming back to say, I actually agree with this, but I'm actually at the higher end of the spectrum. So really, at the end of the day, it's about values. But point taken.
Microphone 1.
Oui.
Eric Robart, Fisheries and Oceans. I'd just like to point out here that if you draw a parallel with an insurance policy, it costs you less to insure a Ford Escort than a BMW, right? Just wanted to point out that losing a job, losing a job that pays you 50,000 isn't quite as bad as losing a job that pays you 100,000, is it? Any other questions? Well, if you allow, I'd like to pick up on what my colleague has just said. What's your name? What's your name, please? Stéphane Jeté. What's your department? Sorry, I can't hear you if you don't speak into the mic. Speak into the mic, please. Thank you. Well, the idea here is that we have to pay for what we have, what we get. I agree with that. But you gave the example of the BMW and of the, what was it, of Miata, the Ford Escort? That's right. It's not the same value, is it? You're not going to pay the same price for a Ford Escort and a BMW. Well, what are they? Both cars work very well. So if you pay the same price for both, what are you going to do with that? I wouldn't pay the same price for both. Neither would I. That's my question. I don't understand what you're saying. It's a question of insurance, apparently.
Micro 2.
Microphone number 2.
I was just going to say, unless there's another question, but there is. So I'll go to microphone 2 anyway, because it's her turn. But actually, did you ask a question earlier in this round? No. I don't think you did. You go ahead.
Okay, so Catherine Newell, ISED. So my question is similar to what I asked on the budget with respect to further analysis on what this change means in the overall revenue to the association. So, and with respect to the demographic shift that is happening and will continue to happen over the next couple of years. I don't have any objection with the proposed change, but I think it's very important for the association to understand and for the members to understand what the effect might be on the overall revenue to the association. And for that reason, I would suggest that that kind of analysis be done.
I think that's a great suggestion. I work at Agriculture Canada, and we do these great projections of what crop prices will be in the future. And then there's always some sort of shock that comes in and just ruins everything. And so I kind of look at what happened with deficit reduction, and no one probably could have seen that coming. So I think what's really important is meetings like this where we can have these kind of budget discussions. So if something like that happens and we have a major shock and demographic shift where there's this huge uncertainty, we can talk about it and come up with strategies and contingencies. I don't have a formula for you, and I'm not sure if that analysis has been done or if it is possible, but I know that there are trends in the public service and there's going to be more staffing and more hiring. But I don't think anyone can predict what will happen with government transitions and those sorts of things, and I don't know.
We do know about the demographic shift, and we do know existing numbers in existing classifications, I assume. So it would be good to see what the projection is based on, what the overall revenue is going to be based on the change of the dues structure. We have a little bit in this budget, but...
That's very I think that's a very good question. And I think going back to Maggie's point that it is sort of dependent on a lot of political context. But that's actually a very good point. And I'm just thinking, is there a way to sort of examine that? I can't see it right now, but I'll think about that.
Okay. Miranda.
I just wanted to applaud the spirit behind this. Like, it's really a socialist kind of caring for those who may be, I guess, disenfranchised by the structure kind of attitude. Being a socialist, I can really appreciate that. I had one question, but just to kind of build the context, your comparison with progressive tax structures is a bit off, just in that for things like progressive tax, for things like these sort of progressive initiatives in society, it's, to use a simple analogy, it's the 99%, right? It's the 99% who are disenfranchised, who need assistance, and the 1% who have all the privileges. But if you look at the breakdown, and you very nicely provide it all on the website, right? So you can look at the categories and how many members we have. So if you take a look at this, it's actually going to hit hardest something, I don't know, the majority, basically. So it's kind of contrary to the idea of helping the majority who are hardest hit by the structure, when in fact you're going to hit the majority of CAPE members with an increase. So my question is, you said that you started at an AGM with this idea, and I assume that like you heard from the EC1s, the EC2s to kind of drive this forward. What sort of research or like surveys, what kind of input actually led to this progressive dues proposal? Because I assume that it must have come from them.
I think this was asked and answered before, but I think it was asked and answered before the process and how the proposal came about.
Like,
Or the confirmation that it didn't actually come from people, that you didn't actually hear like EC1s and 2s asking for this?
Well, like, we were all EC2s at one point, right? I'm guessing.
Like substantively, I'm still an EC2, right? So.
And are you asking, like, if there was, like, a consultation with EC1s and EC2s specifically? Or?
Yeah, like, if your first step of research was not, this is our proposal, but was instead, like, what are your issues? And then you build up from there, right? So have the people self-identify.
Well, we didn't do, like, an online consultation or anything like that. Like, we did have the Young Members Committee, which is full of young members who have been EC2s. I've also talked with folks in the regions. Agriculture Canada has a lot of regional offices, and there are significant differences and variances in EC levels in the regions versus in the NCR. And yeah, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just asking because like your research is really good and you have really fantastic representations. I just kind of assumed I must have been missing something because I don't want to like assume that they're disenfranchised if they haven't self-identified in that way.
I wouldn't say like disenfranchised is like.
Or that they require special treatment. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
I
want to
think we called it like
just
challenges and disadvantages that young members face in comparison. But
go ahead.
And just one more thing, because in the original package that we sent to members, which if you went to the last SGM, you got it. It was the more colorful version. We actually did a breakdown of what the effect would be for the membership as a whole. And so, like, members who would see their monthly dues decrease with this option is around 38%. After that, there's members whose monthly dues would increase by less than 50 cents, and that's a whole 22%. There's another 23 or 24% whose monthly dues would increase between 50 cents and $8, and then another 20-something percent whose dues would increase by more than 8%, or $8 a month. So just to correct that, you can actually go and see this. It's still on the website in the archive section.
Okay. Microphone 2, and I think this will be the last question. I think we've hit 20 minutes or so go ahead.
Mark Switzer, StatsCan. I'm just wondering, like, this is instead of calling it progressive, why don't you call it perpetual? Because basically you're just increasing union dues every year now without having to go to the membership. But I'm just wondering, when was the last time the dues increased, and like how often they've increased in the past compared to now? Like,
I'm not sure.
You didn't look at that
Is
at
Nick
all?
around? Nick would. Nick might have an answer on that. I have an answer, but it's probably not as complete as... So, Nick, the question was the history of dues increases over the last, pick your time period, decade, 2 decades, whatever.
In terms of...
So how often have dues increased? I think that was the question, actually, until now.
Yeah, no. They've increased twice in the last, I'd say probably, I'm guessing maybe 12-ish, 12, 13 years. So we'd gone down to a reduction. At one point, I think we were down to 23, kind of in the SSEA days. Then we went up to 35 and then 48. So 2 increases in about 12, 13 years.
So 2 very...
Just off the top of my head,
So 2 very
On a flat rate.
discrete...
Yeah.
2 very discrete increases. I think that...
The last one, though, took quite a bit of effort, I think. We took basically 3 kicks at the can, right, to get an increase from 35 up to 48. But at that point, we were kind of dealing with a DRAP environment, and we did actually have a fairly noticeable deficit, if you will. We were at a situation, for those of you that were on the national executive back then, where we were basically in a deficit of about $100,000 a month.
Okay.
But then what happened was the membership numbers recovered, right? So we kind of dipped down and then we went back up in revenue stream then, post-DRAP. So now we're in a surplus.
Yep. Yes. So that brings us to the end. Thank you for your questions again. I will not repeat the date. Well, I will repeat the dates, but not the whole phrasing. June 15th, you get your ballots. June 27th, you must vote by then online. As is the case with the other 2 questions on the ballot, a simple majority of the votes cast will be sufficient to ensure passage. Remember that only members in good standing of CAPE for whom we have a valid email address on file are entitled to vote. If you have changed your email address, this is actually quite important given the earlier comments about Phoenix, by the way. If you have changed your email address or if you are not certain whether you are on our electronic mailing list, go to the membership registration, change of address page, and fill out the registration and change of address forms. Thanks a lot for coming out, and have a good night.